I'm going to start introducing our speaker here. So I am so delighted to welcome Jessica Storey-Nagy to uh, this installment of Research and Language Learning series. And Jessica is a research associate and adjunct faculty at Indiana University in Bloomington in the Department of Anthropology and Russian and East European Institute. Uh, uh, and um, and Jessica received a PhD in in the Department of Central Eurasian Studies, specifically with the Hungarian specialization, and also Jessica is the vice president of Hungarian Studies Association, as well as now president-elect of the Hungarian Studies Association. And I'm so delighted to welcome you, Jessica. So take it over.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you so much for the invitation. I always love working with you all at the University of Illinois. You're really great people, needless to say. So I'm just going to share my screen here, and we'll get started. Okay. Let me just make sure this is on full screen. Okay, can everybody see this? I
Yes,
hope
we
so.
can.
Okay, good. I've titled my talk, Political Talk in Hungarian, Meaning Making and Language Learning in the Field. I actually am a linguistic anthropologist and a political anthropologist as well, in addition to being an area study specialist. And so I study political talk. So um, speaking in language has extra special meaning for me and for the research that I do. And I, in fact, could not do this research at all if I had no Hungarian language knowledge. And I will also preface this by saying that my language knowledge is not perfect. I am not like a near native speaker. I am an advanced speaker. I am definitely a proficient speaker. And I am able to do my research. And I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about my kind of my journey, right? My Hungarian language journey and how it aids my research, and how sometimes I still struggle with it today, as I think many researchers do. But through that struggle, there's just so much to learn and to be gained. And so I hope in the end, right, you walk away from this knowing how important language learning is. Okay, so this is Budapest, Hungary. This is where I work. I do work in the capital because mainly because I'm interested in political discourse. Well, I work all over the country, right? Hungary is a country of about 9.7 million people. It's about the size of Indiana. But the by far the biggest city is Budapest, and it is kind of this turning into this European cosmopolitan capital, and has been. As you can see, it sits right here on the Danube, and it has, all of the big industry in Hungary is here, save some of the car manufacturing plants, for instance, which are in the west of the country. So it's a wonderful place to work. And it really provides me with just a number of different types of people when it comes to political affiliation to talk to on a regular basis. That is, I also do research in Esztergom in the north of the country, in Pécs in the south, in Győr in the west, and sometimes in Debrecen in the east. So I do get around, but Budapest is now like a second home to me, and is my research base. Okay, so how did I get here? I think this is from my very first trip to Hungary. I think I'd been in the country about 4 hours. Um, I fell into Hungarian studies in a very strange way. I was in Colorado, which is where I'm from. I lived in Denver, and I met a guy, actually in an Aikido dojo, which is a strange place, but that's where we met. And he was Hungarian, and we started dating, and eventually I married him. This is before I married him, though, and this was our first trip to Budapest. And he took me to his mom's flat. It's called a lakotelep in Hungarian. It's like one of these big Soviet housing flats without air conditioning, kind of like these, one or two room flats. And so we got there and it was still daytime. We had just flown in from Denver and the trip took about 32 hours because we had a layover or two. And we wanted to stay awake. We didn't, it was like afternoon and so we went out and it was September and there was, we were in Budafolk, which is on the Buda side of, I can go back. This is the hilly side. On the left side of the screen is Buda and the right side is Pest. And so we were in this hilly side of the city on the southern side of Buda. And there was a wine festival going on. And so we went outside and I got some wine. I think I had some strawberry wine, which I had never had before. And I, walked a few blocks talking to my boyfriend at the time. And I kind of almost walked into this. And I remember looking at this and I said, is that an ox? And Attila, my now husband, said, yeah, that's an ox. And I turned around and he snapped this picture. And I just remember thinking that Hungary has never been what I expect. Um, and it always surprises me, and it just always provides me with, I don't know, it's endlessly fascinating in so many different ways. And so this is indeed how I fell into Hungarian studies. My first contact with the Hungarian language was on that trip because when I went there in 2011, I did not speak Hungarian at all. I knew a few words, but not too many. And my first contact with the language was through food. And so here on the left, you can see me eating langos, which is like a flatbread and drinking some beer. I think that's probably Czech beer. And there's cheese and sour cream on top of the langos. And in the middle, you see me roasting bacon over the fire. Hungarians call that solana. And it's very good. You can see on the right side, you can see the solana itself with peppers and onions and things like that. And when I went there, I said, oh, well, Americans roast marshmallows over the fire. And they were like, that's ridiculous. We have bacon. And indeed, it's very tasty. They're not wrong. You drink red wine with this, and it's always a fun evening when you can roast solana. I also ran into goulash lavesh, which is goulash. Americans call it goulash, and oftentimes we serve it and have the stew form, and we serve it over noodles. And most people in Hungary are quick to tell you that you're wrong and you shouldn't do it. It's a soup. Lavesh means soup. And it was served with this wasn't, sorry, this is like a stock image of goulash. And then on the right, this is my picture from my first trip of my friends and I making something called chipetke, which is just like this little pasta that you roll up and then kind of boil in hot water and then put in the goulash lavesh. It's an option. It's a way of doing it, right? There are many different ways of making goulash. I don't want to offend anybody. So Magyar goulash leves csipetkével means Hungarian goulash soup with the vel at the end of the csipetke is with. So with csipetke. The first Hungarian phrase that I learned, again, still all these pictures are from, except with the exception of the stock photo from this trip. The first phrase I learned was nagyon finom, which means it's delicious, right? You do a lot of eating, especially when you meet someone's family for the first time. Hungary is a place where you go and you are served the first course and you're expected to have two or three if you want to be polite. And they're not small. So you kind of have to eat your way through it. And you very quickly learn the word finom, which means it's good. If you want to really please your host, you say nagyon finom. So this was the first phrase, I think, in Hungarian I learned. And this is actually me at the table in my father-in-law's backyard in Esztergom with kind of some extended family. And you'll also see, I think it's, yeah, Aran Asok, which is a Hungarian-made beer on the table. It's not very good, but it's fine. It totally fit the moment, and I have lovely memories from that day. So that was my first contact with the language. When I was there, though, you also run into the language literally when you're walking through the city, right? So This on the left here, you'll see this, these are street signs. So in Hungary, the street signs are actually on the sides of buildings. And this says Roosevelt tér, which means Roosevelt Square. And it is indeed the Roosevelt you're thinking of. And then Széchenyi István tér. And Széchenyi is a surname. István, which is Stephen, is a first name. And tér is square. And so you can tell that at one time, the square was named Roosevelt Square, and now it is Stephen Széchenyi Square. And I thought that was really interesting. I remember thinking it was interesting that, first of all, the street signs were on the sides of buildings and not like on a post. And I thought they were beautiful, and they give you so much information, right? At the top, it says the ötödik kerület Lipótváros, which is the fifth district called Lipótváros. Um, and then I also remember finding it interesting that they had these signs, like the one on the right here. This is actually like a pedestrian path sign. And I remember thinking that sign was Hungarian. And indeed, it's not Hungarian. It's used all over Central Europe, right? I had done a lot of work I'm a musician and had done a lot of work in Western Europe before this, but that was the first time I had seen that sign and mistakenly thought it was Hungarian. But what's interesting about sorry, to go back to the picture on the left, the Roosevelt Square and the Széchenyi István Square signs, is that when I asked my husband about this, he said, "Oh, well, they wanted to make the square more Hungarian, so they changed the name." And I thought, and again, Stephen Széchenyi, despite the fact his first language was actually German, was is known as as the most famous Hungarian, and so they wanted to change the name of the square. And I just remember thinking all of these things were really interesting, even on my first trip. And I kind of naturally gravitated toward looking at national symbols too, and borders, and understanding, I think even then, that these signs of Hungarian nationalism were just as important as a lot of the words that I was learning, and a lot of the words that I was seeing on the sides of buildings and things like that. So here you have at my father-in-law's cabin in Esztergom, which is very much like a dacha. It's like his summer cabin, if you all are familiar with that type of structure. On the left is the Hungarian flag, which he keeps, and it had been blowing in the wind, right? Which is why it's all kind of tangled up there. And which he keeps out all the time, which is quite odd, actually, in Hungary. People don't fly flags like they do in the United States. And then on the right, you see Magyar Köztársaság, which means the Hungarian Republic. And what's interesting about this is on the northern border of Hungary in Esztergom, as you're coming from Slovakia and going and driving into Hungary. You see this border sign. And what's interesting about it, right, is you have one on the left side that is of the Hungarian flag, the colors of the Hungarian flag, and has the Hungarian crest in the middle. And on the right side, you have the EU flag, right? So things like that also became interesting to me. What I noticed about Hungary on my first trip too, I think, and what I ended up studying were national symbols and things like this, and how political talk influences people's perceptions of these national symbols and their feelings of nationhood. Um, and so, so yeah, this was my very first contact with the language. So what did I do from there? Well, I married the guy, and then I'm going to move this because I can't really see my text. Excuse me. Okay, so I married the guy, and then I went to study Hungarian at IU from Denver. I really fell into this. I literally said, I want to go to grad school. I wonder if Hungarian studies is a thing. And indeed it was. IU is the only place where you can get a PhD in Hungarian studies in social science. And so I came in just thinking I would get the MA, but I did stay for the PhD. Obviously, I've completed about 4 years of Hungarian language study here at IU, if you add them all up, which was part of my MA and PhD in SUS, or Central Eurasian Studies, where the Hungarian Studies program is. I've also in the past taken at IU French and German and Estonian. As an undergraduate, I took Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, and Latin. Um, I will say I don't really speak any of these languages very well anymore. I can certainly read in French and German and a bit in Estonian. Um, but my Spanish, Latin, and Mandarin Chinese language knowledge has kind of faded, unfortunately. Um, and then I also took 2 summer language and culture programs in Budapest during the course of my graduate study. But what really helped me learn Hungarian, and honestly, my Hungarian language knowledge waxes and wanes, or at least it really did during my graduate career, especially when I stopped taking Hungarian and started taking Estonian, and forgot that I needed to keep practicing Hungarian every day. Don't do that. Um, uh, it kind of faded, but then when I went back in the field, it quickly built up again. I learned too that there are, a number of different types of language learners, and I really need to talk to people in order to keep my language knowledge fresh. Which helps. I'm married to a Hungarian. It's good, right? But it helps to talk to a number of different types of people and hear, different idealects, or in linguistics, that's kind of like the ways that certain individuals talk, right? And that helps me the most. So I was in Budapest I went in August of 2019 and left. Very luckily, that was actually when my fieldwork was scheduled to end about 3 weeks before the pandemic hit in February 2020. There, because I'm an anthropologist, I conducted participant observation, which is where you participate in society and observe it at the same time. And you take field notes every night as to kind of like what you did, who you interviewed, and what you noticed. You just try to write as much down as humanly possible every day. I conducted semi-structured interviews. And again, this is where my language knowledge grew the most. Um, and and yes, and I have here issues, interrupted study. That was kind of Estonian, or when I came back and the pandemic was raging and I had a 3-year-old, I couldn't practice Hungarian as much as I wanted to. But I have maintained a level of advanced Hungarian language knowledge, and uh, will note, right, that when you're learning a language, like I did when you're an adult, right? I started learning Hungarian when I was 29. You have to be willing to kind of push through those rough moments when you don't feel like you're doing as well as you should be doing. You have to, push through that so you can continue your research. And I hope as I go forward and tell you more about my research, you will think that, I'll show you how much that actually matters. So, so that's where I got a lot of my Hungarian language knowledge. Now, what did I do with it when I got to Hungary when I was doing this field research? Um, I wanted to ask this question, right? I was interested in Hungarian nationalism, interested in nation and symbols and words and linguistics, and how language holds power, how politicians influence citizens and their perceptions of themselves as citizens. So I went in with a really broad question. What does Hungarian mean to Hungarians? And what does Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, have to do with it? So I conducted 6 months of ethnographic fieldwork. In that time, I was able to get in 110 semi-structured recorded interviews. So I recorded them. So if I didn't understand something that someone said, it was okay. It was recorded, right? I also gave follow-up interviews. Um, I did a media study of political texts in circulation. So online, right? You can see certain, and I'll explain texts in a minute, but like certain words or phrases, you can kind of track them online and see what people do with them. It can be really fun. And I also conducted a linguistic landscaping study. My interviews were in English and Hungarian mostly. So like sometimes German or French would would creep in there, but not too much. 54 of my interviews were in English. And that was because, remember, I had taken Estonian before I went to Hungary. And I felt like my language knowledge had waned a little bit, and I wanted to build it up again. And I got a Hungarian language tutor again when I got to Hungary, which really helped. And then I was able to kind of build up my language knowledge again. But in the process of doing that, I still wanted to be able to conduct interviews because I only had 6 months. So I started with people that could speak English well and fluently. So 54 of my interviews were in mostly English, and I'll explain the mostly in a second. 27 of them were in all Hungarian, and 29 of them were bilingual. So they had meaningful stretches of discourse in both English and Hungarian. Um, why it was mostly English and never 100% English was because I was closely examining Hungarian texts. So what does that mean? I was interested in these words following, and you'll see them here. The first was Magyar, which is Hungarian, Magyarság, which is Hungarianness, Magyarország, which is Hungary. That's what Hungarians call the country. Hungarikum, which is things that are Hungarian. This is kind of a politically created text. Szocialista, which is socialist, kommunista, which is communist, liberális, which is liberal, nemzeti, which is national. And then because of the political climate, I was also interested in the texts bevándorló, which is immigrant, menekült, which is refugee, and migráns, which is a pejorative term. It's not a nice thing to say, and it means migrant. And so I wanted to know, because all of these texts were in circulation in the Hungarian media, I wanted to know what the uptake was like, right? What people actually thought of these specific texts. So a text, and I'm using this word a lot, and it means something probably different than what you think it means. In linguistic anthropology is a word or a phrase. So it can be like a political slogan or just like one word that has implicit layers of meaning. And these layers of meaning are called indexical orders. So for instance, on the right, you will see this is a campaign against an anti-Semitic campaign that the Hungarian government ran in 2017 against George Soros. I say it the Hungarian way. He was actually born in Hungary. It's Soros, oftentimes if you hear it in the United States. But this campaign was notable for a number of reasons. You can see kind of one of the reasons it was very notable, right? This is the Hungarian metro system, so their subway, and the signs are kind of posted everywhere. So these are Hungarian government signs funded by oftentimes EU money or like taxpayer dollars. It's very murky, trying to understand exactly where the funds come from, which is a problem that Hungarian citizens oftentimes have with campaigns like this. And it says, don't let Soros have the last laugh, right? Because in the Hungarian political world, George Soros has been blamed for everything under the sun, right? Every single problem on planet Earth is his fault. And I wish I was exaggerating there, but I'm not, right? If you if you look at Hungarian political discourse. And so this is kind of when that started, when Soros really came onto the scene. So, for instance, you could be interested in the text like I am, Soros. What does that mean in Hungarian? It means something very different in Hungarian than it does in English, right? It's not the same thing. So looking at a text in Hungarian is really important. If you say Magyar in Hungarian and then you say Hungarian in English, even for someone who is Magyar, who is Hungarian, those two texts have different meanings, right? And so I wanted to get at the meaning in Hungarian, not the meaning in English. Okay. So that's kind of what a text is for me. And Silverstein and Urban kind of defined this in 96 when they said texts are words or phrases that are the building blocks of human cultural worlds. And that's a paraphrase, but that's kind of the meat of what they're getting at. This is also important, when I was saying that Magyar is one thing in Hungarian and Hungarian in English is a different thing for a Hungarian. There's a reason for that. In linguistic theory, it's called language ideology, right? Where so ideologies involve active processes of construal and uptake, applying theories about the world, linguistic and otherwise, and constructing sign relations that may take complicated shapes, right? So all of this is to say is that in order for us to understand words and understand how those words work and interact with the world and with us, there's a lot that goes on in our brains, right? And it's an active process, and it's not something that ever ends, right? So in this book, here, Signs of Difference by Sue Gall and Judith Irvine, they were looking at something called sites of ideological work. And those are moments and practices in social life in which experiences and ideas are swept up, drawn into ideologized interpretations. And so what does that mean? It means that you can look for these sites of ideological work where language ideologies are made and built, and you can try to figure out how they're built, and what they mean, what's going on with this textual creation and what some of the implications of that textual creation might be. Um, so uh, this is part of my research. So this is kind of I guess the world in which my research lies, right? So speaking Hungarian is something I must do in order to do my research so that I can understand the language ideology as it exists in Hungarian for Hungarians. Okay. This was part of what I did, and one of the ways that I understood that. And actually, one of my favorite things to do in Budapest, just as strange as it sounds, is taking pictures of billboards and political advertisements. I really like it. I find that it can tell you so much about political power and about language and semiotics and signs and things like that. So I snapped this picture as I was on a bus and doing my field work in 2019, right? And here, I was there for the municipal election campaign. And at the top, you see Dr. Pinter Gábor and Tarlós István. So Tarlós István, or Stephen Tarlós, was the mayoral candidate for Fidesz. So the Fidesz is Viktor Orbán's party. He was running István. Sorry, Tarlós István. And then he's shaking hands with a mayoral candidate for a district spot. So there's one mayor of Budapest, and then each district in Budapest has its own like little mini mayor or something like that. We don't really have the same structure in the US, but that's what's happening here. So this is a Fidesz ad spot. Fidesz, again, has I don't have time to talk too much about Fidesz, except to say that they have most of the money and resources in Hungary. They run an autocratic government, and Viktor Orban is the head of that government. And so he has, through many friends of Fidesz, bought up all of the prime billboard spots in Hungary. And so here at the top, you see this huge billboard. It's very nicely done, right? It's in the city, and it's very visible. And then if you look directly below that, you see the opposition party's political advert, Vegyünk vissza Budapestet. So let's take back Budapest. And this was Gergely Karacsony, who was an opposition candidate. What's interesting is he actually won the election, which was a shock to Fidesz and has not since happened. Again, unfortunately, the opposition has not had a strong comeback since then, but he actually did win the election. So anyway, but what's interesting about this is when Hungarians look at something like this, they would often say that they could see corruption. So what did they mean by that? They can see that Fidesz has the power in physical city space. They've bought up the power while the opposition is left with the side of a bus stop to advertise their candidate on, right? So linguistic linguistic landscape studies can show you something really, really interesting. It can also show you dissent, right? So, and sorry, this picture in the middle is a bit blurry. I'm not quite sure why. I was trying to fix it today, but I just couldn't. So this is another Fidesz mayoral candidate, Dr. Hoffman Tamás. And if you look closely, one of his eyes is covered with a sticker. And on the right side is a close-up of that sticker, and it's Orban on a tiny train. And this is a reference to it's called it was a tiny train that Orban had built to Felcsút, which is a place where he has a huge soccer stadium and is widely known in Budapest among the opposition members as a symbol of Hungarian corruption, right? So they've just stuck this little because nobody takes the train, right? It's Orban kind of built it for himself and his friends, right? So it's a really lovely picture of dissent. And then On the left side here, this is an opposition campaign that mocks a government campaign. So tudta means did you know or do you know? And the government had this campaign that was mostly an anti-migrant campaign that would say like, do you know migrants are stealing our jobs or something terrible like that. And so here you have the opposition, and it says, do you know that Fidesz city leadership is giving public procurements to their relatives? And then there's a little example here at the bottom. So the Novabau company, Novabau Hungary company has already reaped like 2.5 billion forint. So so there are signs of, political dissent in linguistic space here. And again, this is something I would never be able to do without Hungarian language knowledge. And it doesn't have to be perfect in order for me to do this research, right? I see these things, I can read them in space and take pictures, and then I get to go talk to people about them and see what they mean to Hungarians. And so that's part of, like, that's an example of how I investigated language ideology and the ideology of signs in public space in Hungary. My research findings for my dissertation, right, were the following. So the ethnographic research shows that after political elites produce discourse, people talk about those political texts with those they trust before going to vote, oftentimes in private spaces. So political talk in private spaces matters because as texts circulate between public and private spaces, people produce meaning from otherwise ambiguous or abstract political slogans before voting. And this process heavily influences and can even change the way people vote. Again, I would not have known this had I not done research in language. On the right side, people often ask me too, like, okay, what is Hungarian then? Like, what did you find out is Hungarian? How did Orban change Hungarianness? When I asked 110 different people what Hungarian was, I got 110 different answers. And I was joking with my cousin kind of at the end of my stay about what Hungarian is. And I said, like, it's different really for everybody. Like there are some trends, right? And I definitely talk about some of these trends in my dissertation, but there is no definitive what is Hungarian, despite the fact that Orban wants people to think there is, or despite the fact that he has actually made some people feel like they're not Hungarian. It's still hard to define Hungarianness. But there is one practice that I ran into in almost everybody's house, right? While I was conducting field work, so many people were so kind. It really blew me away. And I got so much free food. Again, food is very important in Hungary. And oftentimes I was given leftovers. And I was given leftovers in a cart. So this is carte d'or ice cream. And when it's gone and you wash it out, it's just this plastic container. And I was always given leftovers in carte d'or ice cream containers. And so when my cousin asked me what Hungarian was, she was actually packing leftovers for me in one of these containers. And I told her that, like, that's Hungarian. This practice is Hungarian. And I actually put this in my dissertation, kind of to highlight, right, almost the absurdity of what it is, right, to be Hungarian or American or French. Not to take away not to take away any meaning from it, right, but just to highlight that meaning making is so incredibly complex. Okay, so that's what I found from my dissertation. I wanted to show you a little bit of what I'm working on right now. This is another billboard. I love billboards, right? So this is another billboard in Hungary, and it says béke. Béke means peace. And it says also right now that we need it now more than ever, right? And this is Prime Minister Orban here. And you see that he actually is embodied in the word peace, right? And you can also see again that Fidesz has not given up their very, these really visible billboard spots. They also have billboards like this one. This says stop habaru or stop habaru. That means stop war. And you can see all the opposition members here and George Soros, right? He's never gone. He's always the puppeteer behind everything in Hungarian conspiracy theories. So you have Péter Magyar in the H. He's kind of this opposition politician right now who's actually threatened Orban a bit. George Soros, Karacsony, it was the third one over. He's that mayor that beat Fidesz in the election. And then another really well-known opposition figure, right, on the right, Gyurcsány, who was a very prominent liberal socialist, well, not a socialist, but he wasn't liberal, a socialist Hungarian politician for a very long time, and kind of almost single-handedly made the left collapse in Hungary. So these are of varying ideologies, the left, people of varying ideologies, the left in Hungary, and they also have become now the war party. So what is this in reference to, right? You have Fidesz as the peace party, and and the opposition as the war party. This is in reference to, of course, the war in Ukraine. Fidesz is an unofficial, even though Hungary is a European Union member state, Fidesz is an unofficial ally of Putin. And here you can see unofficial or official allies and unofficial allies of the European Union, right? Just because they are Hungarian politicians here who have been branded the war party. So Fidesz has said that there should be peace in Ukraine, that they can bring it, and that the U.S. cannot, that the United States will only cause further war in Ukraine, right? So this is this world in which this text peace and the text war exist in Hungary. So then the question becomes, what do Hungarians do with this text? Reddit is very illuminating. I can't wait to go back to Hungary and do more research. I was there last summer and took some pictures of these posters, but I haven't had the chance to talk to too many people about them. So I'm really excited to do that next. So here you have Béke with Vladimir Putin, Béke with Xi Jinping, Hagy béke, which means leave us alone, right? And then here, let me just move this. Sorry, it's covered. This is obviously the Empire from, or sorry, the Emperor from Star Wars, the evil Emperor, right? And he says here, vote for us and the blessed peace will arrive, which is to me makes me think of death, right? I was talking to my husband about this today, actually, when I found this a week ago. And I was like, does this make you think of death, or does it just make you think of Star Wars? And he was like, oh, I don't know, maybe a little bit of both, right? So here, Béke as a text has taken on this totally different, sinister meaning. It doesn't mean peace or anything peaceful anymore. It's almost akin to the peace that death would bring, right? And all of this is just from a Reddit thread. So you also have this. Birka means sheep, right? So we need them now more than ever. And then you have a little picture here. So this is actually a saying in Hungary, Béke sége alatt, under the frog's ass, which means just really low. And you have the winners, and then you have Hungary, right? So all of these memes are coming from Hungarians, right, who are criticizing their own political system. You also have this one, and this is particularly funny to me. Béka, or béka, means frog in Hungarian. And when I was learning Hungarian early on, and sometimes even still now, when I'm speaking quickly, I mix up béka és béke, which is frog and peace, right? They're two totally different things. And so here you have Orban as a frog, and it says his stomach is bigger now than ever, basically, and Orban has indeed gained a lot of weight. And then the Chaka Varangy is toad. So just the toad. On June 9th, vote for just the toad, right? So this one is also funny. Okay. So, and it makes this text, Béke, so rich, right? There's so much there in one word, and again, you have to do these things in language and kind of understand wordplay and how Hungarians are working with it and what they're doing. And it's just so illuminating and fascinating and provides so much more. So So why did I study Hungarian? That, right? It provides access to a new way of seeing and understanding reality, right? It's like, whenever you learn a new language, there's just a new window that opens for you. And I don't know, you just can't, there is no other way to open that window. And you can think about language ideology here. And so what keeps me motivated? I mean, yes, sometimes it's very difficult to forward language knowledge. Find things you like. I'm weird. I like billboards. I like memes, and they keep me going. I find them fascinating. I love semiotics, and everybody's different. So you can find that one thing or many things that you like, right? Also, the fate of humanity in the hands of Fidesz keeps me motivated, right? What are the stakes here? They're very high. Fidesz is an authoritarian regime allied with Putin's Russia right now, and for Ukrainians especially, the stakes are exceedingly high. So can we figure out exactly how Orban's discourse motivates his populace? And can we expose, some of that? Um, so that's what keeps me going. And also, and this is my last slide, and so I'd love to take some questions. Um, Orban is very closely tied to Trump, and a lot of American politicians have really started following Orban's policy very closely and trying to emulate it. So this is an image from, I think, New York Times, I believe, maybe the New Yorker. I can't remember which one, but Make America Hungary Again. And Orban is now. He's worked closely with Ron DeSantis before. He was the first. Orban was the first politician to promote President-elect Trump now. And so Hungarian politics is actually something Americans need to reckon with these days as well. And arguably, we won't be able to reckon with that unless we have people that speak Hungarian and can understand, where he's coming from and how his political campaigns work. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for this wonderful presentation. And we have some questions. And audience, feel free to unmute or raise your hand and ask question or type in your questions. And we've also collected some questions when registration started. And we do have one that we would like to start with. And here it comes in the chat. And asking you for some suggestions, and maybe you can address that, and then we'll continue with other questions.
Okay, so do you know of any resources for gaining historical meaning of words, connotations and usage shift over time and space? As a historian, I am not only working with the language now, but also yeah, that's different. Resources that can help capture alternative meanings or usages. Okay. Yes, I do know there is a book, and I can't remember the name of that book, and it is on my shelf, but it deals exactly with this, the etymology of Hungarian words and phrases, especially. And it is only in Hungarian, though, but and I think you can only buy it in Hungary. But as soon as I get home, I will. I can send an email to Joe, and he can get it to whoever asked the question, right? So yes, but that is the only one I know of. So just that one book, but it's a book. It's very thick. So hopefully it will provide like really useful information. I got it as a gift from one of my family members who was very proud they were able to procure it for me, and but yeah, Szívesen.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any other questions? I'm trying to see if there are any hands raised.
Thank you. Yes, Hungary is important now on the global political scene. I think most unfortunately because just because of the direction in which Hungary is heading. But there's a lot we can learn from it.
Tim, go ahead.
Hello. So I have this question. Given that Hungarian is a notoriously difficult language, and often I think people who study difficult languages, when interacting, enjoy talking about what's difficult about it. So I wonder, could you talk a bit about what makes Hungarian difficult? And often linguists would say, like, all languages are complicated. It's a question of how similar is it to the language you're starting from, or is it the case that um, in some languages, it's where in the language you encounter the difficulty. Like, for example, I think English is, for many people around the world, regardless of where they start from, an easy language in the sense that there is tremendous difficulty, but often it's encountered at a higher level than what you need for everyday conversation, right? So you can basically use conversational English knowing very limited amount of grammar. And you can even get that wrong and we still know what it is. Well, you don't need to learn about all of the would that he had been and all that kind of stuff that makes English difficulty. So I guess that's my question. What makes Hungarian hard and where do you encounter it and how do you deal with it as a language learner?
So for me, I have a word order problem. So I would say yeah, let me start here. Language of origin matters a great deal in Hungarian. So because it's an agglutinative language and you're just kind of adding suffixes onto the word, right? And there's vowel harmony. That's kind of difficult to me because the classic example is in my house, right? English, you want to say in my house. In Hungarian, house is ház. My house is hazam. In my house is hazamban, and it's all one word. So for me, I had to do kind of this flipping in my head, and that was constant, and it was really slow. And my husband used to make fun of me because I was like adding endings on very slowly to the word when I first started speaking. But also, um, word order changes in Hungarian. They say you put what's most important at the front of the sentence, and then all the verbs are at the end. And putting the verbs at the end for me was really difficult. English speakers don't do that. We have subject, verb, object, word order. And also, Hungarians love to write really long sentences. And you're reading, and you can see the noun declension endings, and then all of a sudden there's verb, verb, verb. And you feel like you got hit with a mallet when you first start, right? So the word order for me was the most difficult. Also, I think it matters that I'm an English speaker, and that most unfortunately for me, I didn't even start a second language until I was 16, which we know now is problematic. You need to start one before adolescence. And so I think I'm just a slow language learner in general. But I really think this is individualized, right? If I was a Finn or an Estonian learning Hungarian, it would be easier. They're both Finno-Ugric languages. And I've heard that from Finns and Estonians who have learned some Hungarian, and they say, yeah, it's not too bad. But also, the same is true when Hungarians try to learn English. It's very, very difficult. And even Hungarians who have phenomenal English knowledge will mess up things like he and she. So there's only one word for he and she in Hungarian, ő. And I'll be listening. One of my friends will be telling me a story, and they'll use he and she interchangeably, and I have no idea who's doing what, and they're just talking about one person, right? And I think that another person came into the story. So there are some of these kind of classic errors that can be made from language to language, but I really think for me it's word order, and it's really dependent on the language learner. But it's hard. It's a hard language. Spanish was easier for me, I'll say that. But yeah, Hungarian's difficult.
Any other questions, comments?
I see one in the chat here. Advice or practices you can share that helped you through the difficult periods of learning Hungarian. Okay, I will say I think I messed up when I took Estonian. I stopped taking Hungarian and I started Estonian for a year and a half, and I did not continue practicing Hungarian, and that was stupid. So I think because I was able to gain back language knowledge, but it really did set me back. So I think, and that's not to say I shouldn't have taken Estonian. That's to say that I should have continued practicing Hungarian really rigorously while I was taking Estonian, because Estonian did actually help me learn a lot more and understand a lot more about the grammatical structure of Hungarian, because they're related languages and they have similar structures. But But I think the most important thing is to just, even if it hurts, keep going every day, even for just 15 or 20 minutes, if that's all you can fit in. I mentioned memes. What Hungarian social media outlets and accounts do I follow? Oh, so okay, Hungarian media is interesting because Fidesz, the party, some people call it a one-party state. It's very nearly that. But Fidesz, the main party, has taken over a lot of media outlets, and they control a lot. There are certain ones that they do not. Certain online forums and news outlets they do not control. So Telex, it's TELEX.HU, is one of them. So Index used to, index.hu is now taken over by the government, but they used to be this like the prime news source in Hungary. And when it was taken over, most of those journalists from Index formed Telex. So, so Telex is a good one. 444, which is literally just 444.hu, is also a good one. Direct 36, DIREKT 36.hu is an investigative journal team, and it's amazing the documents that they're able to get their hands on, considering the current governmental regime. It's pretty amazing, and they do have a few stories in English. So all of these sites do have an English language site, but they're really limited, right? So you're not going to be able to see all of the news stories, but you will be able to see some of them. So those are some of the free online sites. Most unfortunately, most TV stations and radio stations have been taken over by Fidesz, and a good number of the online news outlets have as well. So, but those are three pretty known ones, and I would start there. And they're the three that I can think of that have like English language pages that are updated on a regular basis. Oh, and accounts, social media accounts. Hungarians are on Facebook, so still, Viktor Orban is on Facebook all the time. He's just like, I'm sure it's not just him posting, but that man posts all the time. Like, I think like 7 times a day at least. More frequently than that. But you can follow him there. I also follow some far right groups on Facebook to understand some of the it can be really disturbing, but to understand what texts they're interacting with and what texts Orban might be using to interact with them. There are also some far left groups on Facebook. There are also a few liberal groups on Facebook. So I'd have to think of all of them, and come up with a list. There's also something, oh gosh, what is the name of that? Another Facebook group about socialism that just makes fun of socialist things in Hungary. That's pretty hilarious. And that can also get pretty political. So, and then Reddit as well. Random posts on Reddit, right? All of this little Beka thread that I found was on Reddit. So I think that's what I can think of off the top of my head, but there's definitely more. So is there still academic freedom in Hungary? Kind of. Yes and no. So at ELTE is a university, it's ELTE, is a university that is largely untouched, not completely, but by Fidesz. And they're a good university in Hungary, the kind of this flagship university of Hungary, Corvinus. So what will happen in Corvinus is that they have a different rector now, but at one point they had a rector who would tell faculty what they could publish on and what they couldn't. And if you published on something that the rector didn't want you to publish on, you would just be fired, right? And there are various means through which you would be let go. It depends also on your discipline. If you're a chemist or a mathematician, you're probably okay. If you're a historian or if you like study political science, like you're in trouble, right? So it really depends on what you do. Oh, and I see this question here about Corvinus and MCC. So Corvinus is a different institution. Corvinus Egyetem or Corvinus University is I don't know when they were founded, but they're a long-standing university in Hungary. And they, have a number of different disciplines. They're one of, I don't know, they're kind of, when you hear that they're Hungary's Harvard, right? This is the thing. But they're a really well-known, well-established university that has kind of been taken over by, not taken over, but is under heavy Fidesz influence. MCC is an organization that was kind of created by Fidesz and houses a lot of actually defunct, like American academics, and a many really just hyper conservative people who are, as far as I can understand it, who are often told what they should write about. This is I guess it's a political organization, is what I mean to say by that. It has very little to do with like the scholar's mission of finding knowledge for knowledge's sake. This is producing knowledge for politicians and so they can stay in power. If I'm going to be like completely honest about it, that's how I see it. That's how I understand its structure. And that's not to say that actual science doesn't sometimes come out of that organization, but that is certainly not the purpose of that organization. So they're just different organizations altogether.
Any comments? Any more questions?
Can I ask a follow-up question to
Yes,
my earlier?
please, Tim.
I think another phenomenon with small languages, difficult languages, and one that are spoken in one country is speakers of that language are not used to foreigners learning it. And I wonder, what is the reaction that you get in Hungary when you speak Hungarian to people there? And is it difficult to get them to speak to you in Hungarian?
Yeah, so I'm really lucky in the sense that I've been told that I have a good Hungarian accent. I think it's because I'm a musician. But there will always come a point in the conversation when I don't know a word or I say something wrong. And people kind of step back. Or they'll start to realize I actually do have a little bit of an American accent, right, when I'm speaking Hungarian. And they assume that I have Hungarian family. Which is true now because I married one, but they assume that I'm like a heritage speaker. That was very, very common. And what's really funny, I got the same question when I told Estonians I was studying Estonia. Or Estonian, I would, that you tell them, okay, yeah, I'm studying Hungarian, and you'll order a coffee or something. Can you help me get through this interaction, right? And they're like, but why? Why are you studying Hungarian? Right. And you tell them, oh, well, I'm a researcher. I'm really interested in your language. And Estonians will kind of do the same thing. So that was the reaction I most often got, was like, why? And then I had to come up with something that satisfied them. Like, my husband was Hungarian, that works, right? that was satisfactory. But then actually a few people were really happy that I was studying Hungarian, like, oh, wow, like finally our language is important. And of course, and like all languages are important, of course. But and there's this classic Hungarian pessimism as well, but that just kind of exists, I think, in society. But people were happy that once they started thinking about it, once we started talking about it, once they got over their initial shock of me learning Hungarian as a native English speaker. A lot of it comes with a lot of it has to do with where I'm coming from, right? I'm an American who speaks English. I'm an American academic. Why would you need to learn this small language? It doesn't make sense to us. And once I explain it to them, why I'm doing it, they often become proud. So shock and then pride, I think, is the reaction I most often get. And then some people just, don't really care, which I get too.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Looks like we're over our time. It's 4:01 right now, p.m. Central Time. So we want to make sure to thank Jessica for giving this presentation today. And oh, is there another question that came in?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, please go
Um,
ahead, Agnes.
It's not a question actually. May I add something to the first question?
Yes,
There
please.
was a question about a resource for gaining historical meaning of words or something. There is a book that I would like to recommend. Jessica, maybe you also know this book. I'm just sending it in the chat. Hungary and the Hungarians, the keywords. It's like a dictionary, and one can read a lot about words and culture, and it's described somehow, some words, and I find it very useful. I'm not totally sure it's an answer for the first question, but maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that's definitely not the book I was thinking about. I don't know about this one. So thank you so much for sharing it. Yeah,
That's the English version, and it also has a German edition.
wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much. This looks like a very helpful source. So we'll definitely share this with the other registered participants who could not make it today, of course. So, well, thank you again, Jessica, and thank you to everybody for joining us today. And we look forward to other installments in the spring. We will send that information to you. But thank you again, and have a good evening.
Thanks. Thanks everybody for coming.
Bye bye.